Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 1257, In the Darkness. Nephi's looked into the darkness as she spoke in an even voice. It happened after the demon of destiny had his falling out with the goddess of the black skies. I think. But before hope escaped her chains, and the demons rose in rebellion against the gods. In the darkness. In the true darkness that fills the halls and caverns of the underworld. Below the hollow mountains. She sighed. When I opened my eyes, I was a woman made of stone. A crude, clumsy, and defective precursor of the stone saints. I was laying on a mountain of abandoned statues just like me, all of them broken, discarded, and forsaken. Everything around me was enveloped by cold darkness, with not a spark of light or hint of warmth anywhere. There was just me, my broken siblings, and the lonesome silence. Sunny shifted slightly. True darkness. Nephi slowly nodded. Yes. Those mountains are called hollow, but in fact, they are full of darkness. Their hollows are like great reservoirs of it. It is where darkness lives, and where it comes from. True darkness is very much like this river, in fact. Legends say that a terrible creature was slain by the gods once, at the dawn of time, and that its blood seeped into the earth. This is what true darkness is, the dark creature's blood. Sunny shivered. That dark creature. To be the source of all true darkness, of the entire element of darkness, it had to be something far greater than an unholy titan. It must have been one of the unknown, then. A being of the void. Ignorant of what he was thinking about, Nephi's continued after a short pause. The hollow mountains are a scar left by the death of that creature. And so, most of true darkness remains below them. This is the place that Nether made his home. However, it was not entirely empty. While he ruled the underworld, there were many others living in the darkness. She lingered for a moment. There were some who followed Nether, the remains of the army he had led to wage war on Storm God. They lived in the great hollows within the peaks. There were also his children, the stone saints, who lived below the mountains, in the heart of the underworld. And there were also creatures who lived even lower, near the very bottom of the dark abyss. That is where the pile of discarded statues was. Sunny frowned. Wait. Nether waged war on Storm God. On his own, before the rebellion. A pale smile appeared on Neph's face. Yes. It was his own private affair. I don't know the details of his relationship with Storm God or why it ended in resentment. But he must have taken it to heart, enough so that he assembled an army and stormed the divine realm. Of course, he lost. Most of his army was decimated, and he secluded himself in the underworld, becoming its ruler and losing himself in the obsession of trying to create the stone saints. She paused for a moment. He must have been lonely and heartbroken, to create a whole race of living beings just to keep him company. Or maybe it was his defiant, prideful way of challenging the gods. After all, only the gods could create living things. Despite that. Somehow, Nether succeeded. But he failed many times before achieving success. Nephi's grew silent for a moment, and then said, I was one of these failures. A quiet sigh escaped from her lips. There were many creatures in the darkness at the roots of the underworld, all of them abandoned and discarded, just like me. Some of them were the results of Nether's failed attempts to create the stone saints. Some of them were outcasts and derelicts for whom there was no place in the world above anymore. All of them were pitiful and weak. And I was the weakest of them all. Nephi stared silently into the darkness for a while. The expression on her face was sad and remorseful. Eventually, she spoke softly, I was just a sleeper, after all. Even with the echo I gained in the nightmare desert, out there in the darkness, my strength was pitiful. Ah, it was such a blow. I never realized how much pride I took in being strong before that nightmare. I had always relied on my strength. I had always told myself that I had to be strong. If only I was strong like my father. If only I was strong, stronger, the strongest. Then I wouldn't break apart. And the people around me wouldn't need to suffer on my behalf, either. Sunny remained silent, remembering Neph's nightmare that he had visited after she returned to the waking world. He also thought about his own desperate pursuit of strength. Nephi smiled. But in the nightmare, all my strength was worthless. All my pride was worthless, too. All I had was weakness, and so, I had to learn. That personal power was not something I should rely on, or could rely on. It had always seemed so important, but in the end, it turned out to be a deceitful mirage. A slight frown appeared on her face. You see, there were not only the outcasts and discarded creatures like me in the darkness at the roots of the underworld. There were other things, as well. Terrifying things that were born from the darkness. These things hunted us. There were ancient horrors dwelling in the very depths of the abyss, as well. Sometimes, they would crawl from below to devour us. No one in the underworld cared about what happened to us, if they even remembered our existence. The aloof demon of destiny, the first generation of the stone saints, and the remains of the demon soldiers. None would protect us. The Forsaken had to fend for themselves. But we were weak, and pitiful. And, most of all, we were divided. Her voice shook a little. Sunny lingered for a few moments, then asked carefully, "So, what did you do? How did you survive?" Nephi's took a deep breath. I had to accept my weakness, and learn how to survive despite being weak. The lesson was harsh, demeaning, and painful. But I had no choice but to learn it. So, I coaxed, persuaded, deceived, enticed, and cajoled the other forsaken creatures living in the darkness. But, most of all, I inspired them. You see, I realized that there was something much sharper than my wit, much more persuasive than my words, and much more compelling than my lies. She paused for a moment. That something was desire. Chapter 1258, Last Light. Hidden in the darkness, Sunny flinched. The image of the piece of wetwood littered with demented runes suddenly appeared in his mind, as did the word repeating in the runes over and over again. Wish. Desire. Be careful of what you wish for. Be careful what you desire. He frowned while Nephi's continued somberly. All I had to do was instill a desire in the Forsaken. A desire for a better life, longer life. Safer life. A yearning for things that they had either never known or long forgotten, comfort, companionship, warmth. I had to give them hope. Because we couldn't survive alone, but we could survive together. Most of these creatures were solitary and numb, resigned to their dark existence. The weight of their hopelessness and despair was too great for me to pull them from it. But, by igniting a yearning in their hearts, I could make them push themselves forward with their own strength. She grew silent once again, and remained so for a long time this time. When Nephi spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. We gathered together, and built a village. It had tall walls and stone houses. It even had a large hall for us to gather and enjoy each other's company. And, for a while, life was good. United, we could protect ourselves from the creatures of darkness, and hide from the abyssal visitors behind the tall walls. I thought that I was on the right track. There were old creatures in the village that taught me their knowledge and wisdom. There were those who had been warriors once. I learned from them, as well. I was the weakest one, but I was liked and valued. Because I could create light, which all of them had forgotten. White sparks ignited in her eyes before trembling and disappearing. Neff's face grew motionless. But then, someone in the village vanished. And then, someone else. At first, I thought that they had left. But after the third one was gone, the fourth, the fifth, we all realized that something was wrong. They didn't leave. They were taken. After that, every night, what served as night in the underworld, someone would disappear. We were under attack. She paused. We tried everything in our power to find and confront the creature that was killing the villagers. We enhanced our defenses, increased our vigilance. We investigated, we explored the surrounding darkness for clues. We set traps, carved sorcerous runes into the stone, and placed lures. We even sent an envoy to plead for help from the children of Nether. But nothing worked. Neff's voice was growing dull. No help came. Nothing we did managed to stop the disappearances. In fact, it only grew worse. At first, the Forsaken were just vanishing, but later, their mutilated corpses started to appear around the village, strewn on stalagmites for us to see. As though the creature was leaving them there to mock us. It was then that I understood. That I had not created a safe haven for us. And instead, simply set the table for the creature of darkness. Her face was motionless, and her voice was even. However, Sunny could feel how fragile that mask was at the moment. Neff took a deep breath. Eventually, everything collapsed. Those who were still alive cursed me and abandoned the village. Tried to. They didn't make it far. There were only 2 of us left inside the empty walls, myself, and another one of the broken statues. The first one who had become my companion, and followed me almost from the very start. We locked ourselves inside the village hall, not knowing what else to do, and barricaded the doors. However, the creature still came. I didn't see it enter, but I could feel that the darkness around us was suddenly alive. Sunny looked at her carefully. So, how did you defeat it? Nephi slowly shook her head. I did not. I had thought about giving one last, desperate fight. But as soon as I sensed it, I knew that there was no hope. That thing. It wasn't something I could fight. So I spoke to it. I tried to appease it. I tried to persuade it. I even knelt and begged it. I tried everything I could, and I could feel it watching me, listening to me, surrounding me. For a while, there was silence. In that silence, Nephi shivered and let out a heavy sigh. In the end, the creature took my companion, but spared me. I don't know why. All I know is that the darkness felt empty again, and I was suddenly alone in that darkness. I was the only one left in the village that we had built. Everyone else, all of them, were dead. Her voice trembled a little. That was the end of my nightmare. Sunny sighed and sat up, summoning the endless spring. Nephi's had talked for a while, after all. Her throat must have been parched. Approaching her in the darkness, Sunny sat down and used his nail to clink against the glass bottle a couple of times, to let her know where it was. Nephi's took the bottle and took a small sip, then looked at the ground. Sunny hesitated for a moment. The appraisal. Do you remember how the spell appraised your performance? Nephi shook her head. I was pretty out of it, there at the end. I remember standing in the middle of the empty hall. And the next thing I remember was you calling me by my true name, at the academy. Sunny sighed, then leaned forward and lightly patted her on the shoulder. Well, if it means anything. I think you did well. You did really well, Neff. He felt her body tremble slightly, and then took the endless spring from her fingers. Thank you for telling me. Now, let's sleep. He lingered for a moment, and then added lightly, please be careful with the sleeping bag, though. Don't rip it. It's really expensive. She nodded, then smiled faintly and lay down, turning away. Sunny looked at Neff's back for a few moments, then silently returned to his own sleeping spot and sprawled on the weathered rock. He stared at the black sky for a few moments before closing his eyes. Would I have survived that nightmare? Sunny really did not know. He could also tell that Nephi's had brushed past many perilous fights and dire torments that she must have endured there. In the darkness. All alone. His heart was heavy, but before too long, the exhaustion won, sending him into the embrace of sleep.